Hi everyone, Mike again with MEG Motors. Today we're going to be looking at the fifth in a series of 8 pieces that we bought from the same guy. We bought 8 pieces for $80, so have about $10 invested in each piece. This is the fifth piece. We've already fixed 4 of them. This is a Murray M2510 straight shaft line trimmer. So yeah, hopefully this is going to be a good one. Doesn't run, of course. I've looked it over. The primer bulb is split open and the fuel lines are hard, so we're going to have to do our standard fuel system repair for sure. But before we do that and spend all the time and effort repairing the fuel system, we want to check the rest of the trimmer and make sure that it's okay. So we know that we need 3 things to make it run. We need fuel, which we know is a problem already, and we need ignition that has to spark, and it has to spark at the right time, and we have to have compression. And so I pulled it through. It feels like it's got plenty of compression. So to test everything, we're going to do a start on spray test. We're going to spray a little carburetor cleaner in the carburetor, and we're going to pull it through and see if it'll start, at least for a little bit. And if that happens, then we know our ignition system and our compression are fine. And so we're going to start with the choke open. Oh, by the way, the air filter cover was missing on this one, so it's already open. So I'm going to go wide open on the throttle with the choke open, and I'm going to spray a little bit in the carburetor. Then we're going to pull it through and see what happens. I'm going full throttle on this because it's kind of flooded after we do that. So we heard a little bit of a start there. That's probably enough, but we'll shoot it one more time. Yeah, that's plenty. If it'll do that much, then we know our ignition system's okay. We're firing the plug and it's firing at the right time, and we have enough compression to make this one run. So yeah, so let's start on the fuel system. We're gonna do a carburetor overhaul, replace the fuel lines, and put on a new primer bulb, and then we'll see if we can get it to run. So I'll reset the camera and we'll get started. All right, so to get the carburetor off with this one, we're gonna take these two screws loose. And we know we're going to be replacing the fuel lines already, so we're just going to cut those fuel lines. And there we go, our throttle cable came out by itself. Yep, and so here's our carburetor. You can see the primer bulb is completely falling apart, which is pretty common. So I'm going to clean this one up a little bit, and then we'll come back and open it up and see what's going on inside. And we'll put a couple fuel lines on, and then we'll be ready to try to see if we can get this one to start. So give me just a minute to clean this up. I'll be right back. All right, so here's our carburetor. Pretty standard carburetor. This is a Rouing, I guess is how you say that. This is a less common carburetor. Typically we have Zama or Walbro. This is a Rouing, which is another Chinese carburetor. I don't see these as often, but at the end of the day, they're really not that much different inside. They all kind of work the same. So we have integrated primer on this one, and like all of these carburetors, it has 2 parts. It has a fuel pump on one side, which is this side over here, and it has a metering chamber on this side. And so the fuel pump pumps fuel out of the tank and makes it available to the metering chamber, and then the metering chamber provides the fuel to the engine for it to run. So we're going to open this up. We're going to start with the fuel pump side. We don't typically see a lot of trouble in here other than the primer bulb, if you consider that part of the fuel pump side. That's typically where it's located. So yeah, there's our fuel pump, our primer bulb right there. We'll put a new one of those on for sure. And then on this side, so we're going to look at this membrane. This membrane is the heart of the fuel pump. This piece right here is a diaphragm that is pulsed back and forth. using pulses from the crankcase. And it works in conjunction with these two flaps, which are one-way valves or check valves that work with the fuel pump side of the carburetor. And so, let me see which way this goes on this way. And so this flap is going to sit on top of this hole, and this flap is going to sit on top of this hole. And so when the diaphragm pulses back and forth, it will pull fuel up through this tube, up out of this hole, and then this flap valve, this check valve, will stop the fuel from being able to flow back to the tank. So once it makes it to the carburetor, it can't go back. And then it'll come through this passage into the fuel pump reservoir, and as it's pressurized, it'll come out of this orifice here. Let me make sure that's right. Yes, it'll come out of this orifice through this passage and up out of this one, and the fuel will be allowed to come up here, but this flap valve will seal this off when the fuel pump is attempting to draw more fuel out of the tank, and that will stop it from pulling fuel back out of the carburetor. So fuel can come up but not out. And so those two valves are important, and so they both have to be in place, and they both have to move freely. If they're stiff or hard or broken off, that's not good. And this diaphragm can't have any holes in it. But this all looks really, really good, and so I don't see any issues there. And we got a little bit of dirt in here right there that we'll clean out. But other than that, the fuel pump looks okay. Like I said, we don't see a lot of trouble on the fuel pump side. So we're going to go ahead and open up the metering chamber, which is where we typically see all of our problems. Something in the gas today attacks the metering chamber diaphragm and makes it get hard, and once it gets hard, it doesn't work right anymore. Yeah, you can hear that kind of crackling sound. That's the metering diaphragm, and it shouldn't be doing that. Let me see if I can get it to come off of there. There's actually a gasket here and a diaphragm. So this is the diaphragm, and this is supposed to be very soft, and this one's very hard. Just typically what we see. So we'll have to put a new diaphragm in there and a new primer bulb for sure. And so other than that, it looks clean inside. We're going to go ahead and pull there's a lever, a metering lever, and a needle in here. And we're going to pull those out and see how they're doing. Sometimes that needle needs to be cleaned. You want to hold your thumb over this when you take this screw out, because this lever is spring-loaded. And if you're not careful, the parts can go flying, and they're pretty small. So it can be hard to find them once they go flying. And I have to get this gasket off of here as well. Most of the time it'll pull off without tearing, but if it tears, I've got some spares. There we go. All right. And so on the fuel pump side, when fuel is pumped through this whole mechanism, it ends up right here at this screen. And this screen is actually a passage that goes through the carburetor to the cavity where the needle sits. And so the needle seals the metering side from the fuel pressure, or the fuel pump side. And so fuel under pressure here is not allowed to come through this passage until the engine draws enough fuel to pull the diaphragm down and depress the lever to raise the needle off the seat. And so it's important that metering diaphragm be soft and flexible and move like it's supposed to, or it can cause this side to either flood or starve for fuel. Everything looks clean over here, so that's good. We're going to clean the needle It's not terribly bad, but we'll clean the needle and we'll put in a new diaphragm, a new primer bulb, and then we'll put this back together and get ready to put some fuel lines on this one. I'm gonna pull some parts from my inventory and then we'll be right back. All right, so I pulled some parts from my inventory. I got a new primer bulb, even the same color. And I got a new metering diaphragm. This one's not exactly the same as the other one, but this hole in this diaphragm wasn't really doing anything anyway. And so this one will work. The important thing is that the 4 screws for the mounting cover are in the right location and the center button is the same size. So sometimes this center button is very pronounced and sometimes it's flat like this one. And so the replacement diaphragm's got the same style center button. So it's gonna work fine. And so we're gonna start putting this back together. We're gonna put the fuel pump side together first. And so we're just gonna put this block, fuel pump block on. We're gonna put our new primer bulb in place. And we're gonna put this cover on. And this cover only goes on one way. There we go. And our 2 screws. All right, and then to clean the needle, I'm gonna spray a little carb cleaner in the corner of my rag. I'm just gonna spin the needle in this carburetor cleaner. And as I do, I'll see dirt come off of it, and I'll keep doing that until I don't get any more dirt off of it. And once I think I have it cleaned, I'll dry it off on a dry spot. So we didn't get too much off of this one. I've seen them leave a lot more dirt on the rag than that, but so we'll put our needle in. We'll put our spring in place. And if you notice on the lever, there's a dimple on the lever, and that dimple, the spring has to fit inside or around that dimple. So you have to make sure when you get this back together, you get the spring in the right location. So I'll set the lever on the spring first, and then work it under the needle, and then look from the side to make sure it's in the right place. So hopefully you can see right there that the spring is in the right place. And then we'll put our retainer screw in. All right, and then on this one, so the height of this lever right here is an adjustment on these carburetors. And if the lever is too high or too low, it can impact the way that the engine runs. It can cause it to either flood or starve for fuel. If the metering diaphragm is not able to move the lever like it needs to, it'll affect how this chamber is filled with fuel. And so I've got a couple of gauges. I've got one for Zama and one for Walbro, but of course this is neither. I've never seen a gauge for this model of carburetor, but I can tell you that typically when the metering diaphragm has a small button like this one, the metering lever should be flush with the gasket surface of the metering side of the carburetor. And so we're going to make that assumption, and we're going to check on this one and see if the lever is flush with the side, and it's actually just a little bit low. And so I'm going to raise this lever just a little bit, and it just bends. You just bend the lever a little bit, just a little at a time. I think we need to go just a little bit more. There we go. So hopefully you can see that the lever now just barely touches the gauge when I put the gauge on. All right, and so with that in place, we're going to put our new metering diaphragm. Oh, I'm sorry. Our gasket goes on first, then our metering diaphragm, and then our cover. All right, that pretty much takes care of our carburetor overhaul. On this one, these are the adjustment screws when we get it running. There's a L right here for low. This is low speed, and this is an H for high speed. The shape on these is called Pac-Man. I don't know why they don't just put slotted screws in there, but they don't. And so it's basically a round-headed screw with a small pie-shaped piece taken out of it, so it looks kind of like the old Pac-Man character. And so there's a special tool called the Pac-Man that we need to adjust these screws. And you can buy that set of tools on Amazon or eBay for $10 or $15. Or you can buy the individual tool if you only need one. So yeah, so let's work on getting some fuel lines on there, and we'll see if we can make it run. All right, so let's work on putting some fuel lines on this carburetor. We already cut them off when we fold the carburetor, so I'm just going to push the ends inside the tank, and then we'll pull the pieces out through the cap. On this one, the return line has a little retainer piece inside we'll talk about. All right, I'm going to shake the pieces out. There we go. So here's our pickup line. It has a weighted fuel pickup on it, which looks to be in pretty good shape. And then this is our return line. And so on some trimmers, not all of them, but some trimmers, the return line, because it barely goes into the tank, will have a tendency to pull out of the tank. And so they'll put the line in and then put this piece on it to swell the line a little bit, so it makes it difficult for it to pull out of the tank. And so we'll reinstall this on the return line. And so to pull the new lines in, here's our new line. This line comes in 4 different sizes, and you can buy a kit on Amazon or eBay where you get all 4 sizes, a couple feet of each one. So if you're only fixing one, that's a good way to get the line. Because I work on quite a few of these, I buy the line in bulk, and it's a little bit cheaper that way. So I've got a nice size piece of this fuel line. So this is the size that we need. We check the inside diameter, make sure it fits tight on the carburetor, and the outside diameter needs to be the right size for the tank. And so we're going to work on putting a new piece of fuel line in here, 2 new fuel lines, one for the pickup and one for the return. And so to do that, we're going to cut a taper in the fuel line, and I'm going to grab a little lubricant. And so I've got a tool here that I bought a long time ago. It has a ring on one end and a piece of wire with a hook on the end, and I can use that to run into the tank and pull the fuel line back through the tank and pull it out through the hole where it needs to be. And so I'm going to pre-poke a little hole in it with this short, sharp awl. And I'm going to feed the line onto the tool. Just like that. I'm going to put just a little lubricant on it. I'm going to start pulling the line back up out of the tank. There we go. And it came right out. Now I got to be careful on this one. I don't want to pull too much, because we only need a little bit inside the tank, and I still have to put this piece on. So I'm going to cut it right here. Then I'm going to put this piece on. I'm going to pull the line the rest of the way out of the tank until that plastic piece hits the tank. I can feel it start to resist. And so that's plenty of line for the return. The carburetor is going to go on right here, and the return's going to go right here. So now we have to pull in a new piece of line for the fuel pickup, and it's going to be the same thing. We're going to cut a taper in our line, Poke a little hole in it. Feed our tool through. There's our fuel line on the tool. A little bit of lubricant to help it come through the tank. And there we go. All right, so I'm gonna measure off about just a little bit of extra fuel line. We're gonna cut this off. Let me see if I can get the fuel line off of the old pickup. I'm trying to get this line off, but it's gotten hard and stiff, so I'm gonna have to cut it. There we go. Got the fuel line off. We're gonna put that on here. And lube that just a little bit. Put our pickup in there, and then we're going to pull the line out until that pickup lays in the tank where we think it needs to. I think I pulled out just a little too much. That's fine. All right. So that's new fuel lines. Let's put our carburetor back on, and then we'll cut the fuel lines to length. So I'm going to put the screws, I'm going to pre-assemble the air filter back. Oh, and I need to connect the throttle cable. Easier to connect that before you put the carburetor on most of the time. I'm going to snug that down. All right, so now we need to cut these lines to length and hook them up. So I already know that this is the return line. So the short line in the tank is going to go right there. I'm going to cut that off. Plug it on. And this is the pickup line. We're going to measure that off. Always better to cut it a little long and then cut it some more if you need to. And it's still a little long. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, so I think we're ready to put some fuel in this. We'll check the primer, make sure that we pump fuel like we need to, and then we'll see if it'll start and run. All right, so I put a little fuel in the tank, and we're going to test the fuel system and make sure that it's working like we think it should. I'm going to press the primer bulb. We should see fuel come up this line. Fill up the primer bulb and then go back down this line. So let's see what happens. Just saw fuel come up this line. That's a good sign. There's fuel in our primer bulb and fuel going back down the return line. So very good. I think we got it plumbed right. We're going to reset the camera. We're going to do a start test, maybe a little tuning to see if it needs it, and then yeah, we'll see how it runs. All right, so I have this one all back together. Something happened between the time we finished this one and now. I actually finished this one a few days ago, But when I went to create this video, I realized that the video of the first start after the repair was missing. And so we've actually already started this one and know that it runs okay. But like I said, that video was lost. And somebody's on the way to buy it right now. And it's been a few days. We have the air filter cover on it now. We bought a new air filter cover, and the air filter cover's on it. And so I'm going to do a restart right now and just make sure that this is still running okay before the buyer gets here. I have the Pac-Man adjustment tool, and we're going to crank this one up and see if it needs any adjustments. All right, so we're going to go full choke. I'm going to prime it a few times. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so it still sounds really, really good. I opened the high-speed mixture needle just a touch. It sounded like it was maybe just a little bit lean, having trouble warming up. But yeah, it runs really, really good. I used it a little bit out in the yard and it cuts really well. And so, yeah, I think we can call this one fixed. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Check my playlist. There's other videos out there about small engine repair. And yeah, nothing too terribly complicated on this one. A little carburetor work, some fuel lines, and we have this one ready to go to work again. So I hope this encourages you to get out and work on yours. They're not that difficult to fix, and it could save you the expense of buying a new one. So thanks again for watching, and stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next video.